you. Thank you very Thank you very much, Anya, for presenting our seminars. It's always once a month. So if the seminar is online, all of you is invited at 5 p.m. More or less Central European time. Today is my great pleasure to invite Caroline Rodrigues, who is PhD student at Federal University of Santa Catarina in beautiful city of Florianopolis in Brazil. Caroline is working on migration, this kind of intersection of migration of refugeeness, language and learning. Now she is a PhD student, but for master work, she also worked with refugees, refugee students, university students in Paraná, in another state in southern Brazil. So she's well experienced in relation of working with refugees, especially refugees from Haiti, that is right now the biggest group of refugees in Brazil. So it's my really great pleasure to invite you, Caroline. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation. The time in Brazil is a little bit different, so sometimes it's difficult to join us. So thank you very much for your time and for sharing your experience with us. Thank you.
I appreciate the invitation. I'm really happy to share some perspectives and some discussions with you. It is really a pleasure. Thank you very much, Professor Carolina. And as she said, I've been working with migrants here for some years. During my master's research, I worked in the university with some students there, Haitian students at the university. And I'm also a Portuguese teacher. And during 2018, some of my students asked me to help them deal with their children's school because they had a lot of questions, how to talk to the school teachers, the coordinators, the directors. They had an issue and they used it to tell me, I can speak Portuguese, but I can't speak Portuguese when it comes to my kids' school. So what's going on with me? Am I a problem? And that was really curious because I have some friends who teach at regular schools, and they have migrant students, and they use it to tell me they couldn't understand kids' parents because they spoke like broken Portuguese and they couldn't get right information. Then I decided to develop this project to understand the reality of schools. When I started, I didn't have a school in mind, but I proposed the project to the city, and they sent me to a special school because they have like 40 Haitian students, and they really needed help, and nobody knew what to do at the time. And then I started last year, but it was during the pandemic, so that was totally crazy. Kids didn't have classes last year. Teachers were preparing activities and sending them home, but migrant kids couldn't do their activities because they couldn't understand. And that was the thing. I can speak Portuguese, but when it comes to school, I can't. What Portuguese am I speaking? Am I a good speaker? What's wrong with me? And people get confused because they don't feel able to live in the city because they can speak Portuguese in the supermarket, they can go to the bank, but they can't study. And that's sad. That affects them a lot. So I started working with Haitian families and also Brazilian teachers, because education involves the entire school, and not only teacher and students, but families and the neighborhood. And the discussion I want to highlight here today is the Raciolinguistic ideologies discussion, because to understand this ability to speak and ability to be understood involves also the images of these people in our society. So who are Haitian migrants in Brazil? How are they seen by Brazilian people? That affects the experience of the kids at school. And this is what I want to highlight with you today. So my presentation is, this is not bilingual school, racial linguistic ideologies in Haitian children experience in a Brazilian school. I've been working in this school for 1 year. As I told you, with teachers, coordinators, students, and families. And I have some discussions to share with you. And I want you to add ideas to my research, because I haven't finished it yet. It was just 1 year at school, and we'll keep working with them for more time than my PhD research, because they asked me to do that. They asked me to stay at school. And I think this is more than a PhD research. This is social and political action. So I'll be there with them next year and on. To start talking about Haitian people in Brazil, I would like to share with you some numbers. Here I have some official numbers from our government talking about migration in our country from 2010 to 2019. And as you can see, a lot of people from different parts of the world come to Brazil to stay for a long time. These are numbers about long-term residents, people who come to live here. And Haiti is here not in the first position in 2010, not in the first position in 2011 or 2012. And people are used to saying that Haitian migrants come to Brazil, started coming in 2010 because of the earthquake that destroyed their country, and they first came to Brazil for surviving. But this is not the case, actually. Our country, Brazil and Haiti, have developed some political alliances, and Haitian people first came to Brazil before 2010, and it didn't start because of the earthquake. It started before because of political alliances. And after that, after the natural disaster, we can see the numbers going higher. And in 2019, more than 15,000 people came to our country. More than 15,000 Haitian people came to our country. But if you see people from Venezuela, they were 70,000. So there are other migrations, there are other countries, other nationalities coming to Brazil, but they're not seen as a problem. They are not seen as invaders like the Haitian people are. And some studies show that, like Haitian people, Black migrant people from a vulnerable country, they are seen really different from other nationalities who keep coming to our country, but they are not a problem. They are not an issue. So why is this particular nationality seen as an issue to jobs and education. This is something we have to think about, because they are not only vulnerable people, they are Black vulnerable people. And that in our society is something that matters a lot. And after these numbers, I want to talk about the context of my research. I developed this research in one local school in the city of Pinhais. Pinhais is a small town in the state of Paraná, in the south of the country. And in the city of Pinhais, there are 134 people. This is estimated 134,000 people in the city. And from this number, around 23,000 are kids at school from 6 to 17 years old. And in this number, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. There was a
Yes.
message here. So from the 23,000 students, around 680 people are Haitian students. It's an expressive number, and there are 680 Haitian people in the city and almost 400 students at school. I'm sorry. 387 students were studying in local schools during 2020. And in this special school, in this school where I was working, where there are around 650 students, 40 of them are Haitian children. And they keep coming during the year because the school year here in Brazil starts in February or March and it ends in December. But in other countries, the school year is different. In Haiti, for example, the school year starts in September and it ends in July. So families who wait till the end of the school year to move to our country, they come here like in the end of our school year. And sometimes there is a misunderstanding of the calendar, and kids miss 1 or 2 years of school because of that. And also the process of migrating, when they come to our country, they usually come to the north of the country, and then they come to the south because here there are more job opportunities. And during the process, kids also miss part of the school year or an entire school year, and they don't get the right information when to go to school and how. They just find out because when they get here, they talk to their neighbors, especially in the city of Pinhais, where there are more than 600 people. There are some neighborhoods where you can see Haitian groups of people in churches and associations. And when they get to the city, they talk to their Haitian neighbors, and then they find out the ways to go to school and how to get to the nearest school, documents they need. They don't get anything from the Brazilian government. That information they get from their friends and families. Actually, in the law, the government is supposed to give this information because every immigrant who comes to the country has the same rights as a Brazilian person. But they don't know that because information is not available in their language. Information is not available everywhere. They need to go to special places to get the information, but they don't even know where those places are. The police department, they don't even know when they get here. And this is something that is important to notice, that we don't know the migrants in the city. We don't know the kids at school, the migrant kids at school, because we can't exchange information with their families. And this is one of the things that makes our work harder. And to talk about how these kids get to school and how they are received, I need to mention language ideologies. As I told you in the beginning of the presentation, there are other migrant children in schools. In this school, especially, there are 5 Cuban kids and other 3 from Venezuela. But people say working with those kids is really easy. They are not a problem. They can catch up with other kids and they understand everything, and they go through the year. In the beginning, they can't speak Portuguese, but then after some time they learn and they go through the year. But this doesn't happen with Haitian kids. And my question was why? Because they don't speak, none of them speak Portuguese when they come. So why a part of the kids just go through the year and another part of the kids is seen as a problem? And I thought about it, I reflected about it, thinking about language ideologies and also some social ideologies about Haitian people in Brazil. To think about language ideologies, I bring this idea of representations that involve language and human beings in the social world. This is Woolard's concept of language ideologies. And this is not only our ideas of language, how to use language, how to interact using language, but our ideas of people and how people are seen and how their language practices are seen by us. And when we talk about language ideologies involving Haitian kids, I bring this quote from one of the teachers I worked with, and she was complaining that this is not a bilingual school, and I will not translate activities from Portuguese to Creole for him because I am providing language learning here. So she was really afraid of giving this kid opportunity to speak his language at school and study or try to understand activities in his language, because she thought this kid would learn Portuguese only if Portuguese was the only language at school. And according to her, according to this person, if he doesn't understand it in a more complex way, a 5th grader, for example, a 5th grader in Brazil is a 10-year-old student, 11-year-old student, and they have this habit when 10-year-old kids don't understand activities in a more complex way, they give the student easier activities from 1st grade. So if a 10-year-old kid doesn't understand what's going on, this kid receives a 7-year-old kid activity because that's easier. And in this way, this kid can learn something in Portuguese. And they also use pictures and different handwriting because Creole language is not accepted in any way. This is not a bilingual school, so kids need to learn Portuguese to come here. This idea of the necessity of learning Portuguese before coming to school is something thought because as they usually say, whenever we travel to another country, we learn the language before going, because when we learn the language, we are able to ask for some food, for some water. These kids, they don't fit here because they don't want to learn our language. They can't say anything, so they don't want to be here. And that's the feeling. And this is really related to news. Brazilian media usually spread about Haitian migrants, vulnerable migrants, actually, because there is some, there are some people who study media about migrants, and they say that Haitian migrants they are frequently seen as invaders in the country. They want to get your job, they want to get your university, but they hate your country. That's why they don't speak your language. And this is also seen in violent interactions between Brazilian and migrants in Brazil, especially Haitian migrants. They are seen as invaders. And this social ideology of a person who is invading my country is seen at school, because they say, if this kid wants to be here, this kid needs to learn Portuguese at home before coming to classes. And when I started the project in February this year, there was a book being prepared, being made by teachers with important information in Portuguese. And those books were, how can I say that? Kids were supposed to get those books before classes begin, so they could practice Portuguese words at home. And the time classes started, they were supposed to speak Portuguese. That was the idea. They have to learn Portuguese before classes start. And of course, that didn't happen. They prepared some papers, they made a booklet with some information, but the kids repeated all those words. And when they got to school, they couldn't speak. It's not only because of language, it's because of who you are and how you are seen, and how the environment provides you opportunity to be valued, to be heard, and not only the words you know in that language. And that's why I bring this quote here from Woolard again, that ideologies are not about language alone. They are tied to identities, right? And this is not only about linguistic form and language practices, language use, but it's tied to the notion of the person or the social group. So how Haitian kids are received at school is tied to how they are seen in our society. And this quote from another teacher gives me that idea. She says, those Haitian students think they need to be accepted when they come. They think they don't need to adapt to themselves. They don't want to learn Portuguese. And that idea of not wanting to learn Portuguese was something really curious, because those kids, when they go to Haitian school, they learn French, they learn Creole, and they learn French. So they grow up learning languages because they need to live in their country. They need to learn French. And how come a Haitian kid doesn't want to learn Portuguese? That kid grows up with that. So learning Portuguese is part of living in a Brazilian society. And when I started the project, I got in contact with the kids to get to know them, get to know their families. They didn't have classes at school, So I needed to know where they were studying, who they were studying with, because they had school activities to do at home. And most of them didn't do any of the activities. So I got curious, what's happening in your house? And after talking to the families, I found out that they do speak Portuguese. They do. But the problem, I had heard 1 year before, I can speak Portuguese, but when it comes to school, I don't understand it. They don't understand me. And then I realized it was a matter of social ideologies about the Haitian community. This perception of a Black person who comes to work in your country and making it easy or more difficult for the kids to study is really related to the way Haitian people are seen in our society. And I had this question: why are Haitian children different from other migrant students? Why are Haitian children different from other migrant students seen as an issue at school? And analyzing all the activities, analyzing the school year, the interactions between teachers, coordinators, and students. I thought that racial-linguistic ideologies was an interesting way to observe those relations at school. The idea of racial linguistic ideologies come from the language and social ideologies all together. And Flores and Rosa, who discuss that theory, they highlight that our perception of language is shaped by our perception of race, while our perception of race is shaped by our perception of language. And it makes sense when we see that Cuban students are not judged the same way as Haitian students are. And one question people usually ask me, do Cuban students speak Spanish? Isn't Spanish close to Portuguese? Well, in written language, it is really close, but in spoken language, it is not. They don't understand each other while speaking. But those kids are well welcomed at school because of social structures, and they have more opportunities to interact to other children, to interact to other Brazilian adults, different from the Haitian kids. The Haitian kids are seen as those who don't want to learn, who are not interested in the activities because they don't do the school activities at home. And when we ask people, okay, but how can they do the activities if they don't understand? And they say, well, they have internet and they can translate everything. But we miss the part that Haitian children, Haitian families come from a vulnerable country. And when they come, they live in communities, and internet is not always available. We don't know information about those students, and we suppose they are not interested in school activities because they don't do that. So what can we do to make the experience of those kids easier at school? And this is one of the questions we have been making the whole year. And also, the idea of racial linguistic ideologies brings to the scene the idea of superior and inferior races. And this idea leads to ideas of superior and inferior forms of language. Those kids come from another country. They have other... They have...
Sorry.
So they come from another country and they have other native languages. First of all, school thought in the beginning children were French speakers. Haitian children were French speakers, but they weren't. They were Creole speakers. And they tried a lot to interact with them in French and they got nothing. So they thought, okay, those kids don't want to talk. And then when I started the project, I told them, well, French is not their first language. Their first language is Creole. And one person asked me, is Creole a language? Isn't it another variation or something? Is it a language? And those kids don't even have their language abilities valued at school. What they speak is not considered a language because French is not their language. So we had some time to talk about Haitian culture and how people speak, what languages they speak, how Haitian school is, how our language studies organized. And again, this wasn't a problem with Cuban kids, other students from Venezuela. This wasn't a problem at all. But with the Haitian kids, this was an issue. And well, the theory of racial linguistic ideologies come from this perception that ideas of languages are tied to ideas of race. And Flores and Rosa, the two people who discussed that, they say that racial linguistic ideologies links the white speaking and the listening subject to monoglossic language ideologies. So in their concept, there is this white listening subject, the person or the institution. This is not exactly a person, the person or the institution who decides the forms of language that are valued, the forms of accepted language in spaces. And not only languages, but bodies, because migrant people in our country speak Portuguese not as a native language. And it depends on their physical appearance, the judgment if this language is okay or not okay, because they come from other countries, they speak other native languages, and their forms of Portuguese are accepted if they are white, they have blue eyes, they come from Europe or North America, but their forms of Portuguese are not accepted if they're Black and they come from vulnerable countries like Haiti. And we can see that a lot in the south of the country. When it comes to university programs, students at university get higher grades when they are from white communities, because they are trying hard. They are seen as people who are trying hard to speak Portuguese. And Black university students are seen as people who can't speak enough Portuguese. They have problems. And this is something decided by this white listening subject. And in our case here, the white listening subject is the school. I can't say the teachers or the school coordinator, because what they say just reflects some structures in our society. The white listening subject in our case is the school, because the curriculum provides opportunities to some cultural subjects, but not to those kids. The activities at school give opportunities to language exchange, but not to those kids. So school here is the white listening subject that measures which bodies and languages count in the context. And talking about this theory, but giving some real life examples, I would like to share with you how racial linguistic ideologies affect the Haitian kids' experience at school. The first point is the silence. Teachers don't even believe they can speak Portuguese. Those kids are at school and they participate in all the activities, but they just stay quiet. When I got there, I started speaking Creole with them, and there was this, we established a relationship. So they started speaking Portuguese with me because they said, I can speak Portuguese because you don't judge me. And I found out that some Brazilian students were laughing at Haitian students because of their Portuguese level or their Portuguese practice, their Portuguese language. And they decided to stay in silence, not to be heard, not to be seen by anyone, because school was a space of oppression. They didn't feel part of that space, of that community. And this drawing here, one of the Haitian kids made this drawing here in the beginning of the year, and she wrote, "My school." And here we can see that are only 3 kids in the classroom. But before the pandemics, this was not the number. This was not the number. Before the pandemics, there were like 25, 30 kids in the classroom. And I asked her, why are there only 3 kids? And she said, because only Haitian kids are my friends here. So I draw me and my friends and the teacher. And when I shared this drawing with the teachers, they were shocked because they couldn't imagine how they feel alone, how apart those kids feel from the other kids. They first thought Haitian kids were distant from Brazilian kids because they didn't want to learn Portuguese. They didn't want to interact. But after talking to them, we found out that they didn't have opportunities to interact. And this started changing the environment at school. Another thing is the violence. When I started the project, the school director told me Haitian children are really violent, and some Brazilian children are afraid of them. And talking to kids at school, oh, where do you play? Who do you play with? How is your physical education class? I found out that Brazilian children make fun of Haitian children because the way they speak, because of their bodies. They are taller and bigger than Brazilian kids. So Brazilian kids make fun of their Black features, and they try to defend themselves, pushing them, or they interact in a violent way because they are trying to defend themselves. And Brazilian teachers and Brazilian coordinators see only the reaction, but not the action that started that. So they think Haitian kids are violent in any situation. But without looking at those specific situations that happen, when Brazilian kids made fun of Haitian bodies and the Haitian language. And all of that brings to the main point of their experience. I believe this is the main point, their low academic achievement. They feel unable to be at school. They don't feel part of the group. So they don't interact. They have questions, but they don't ask because they don't want, Haitian kids don't want Brazilian people laughing at them. So they don't ask. And teachers can't see they are able to learn because they are evaluated in the same way as Portuguese native speakers. And when they have specific questions about language, they can't ask because their questions are not accepted in that place. And this academic achievement is really hard because at some point of the year, kids don't want to go to school anymore. They don't want to talk to other people. They just want to be in Haitian kid groups. And as our ideologies are tied to Haitian social ideologies, we think those invaders don't want to interact with Brazilian students. But the point is, they don't feel welcomed. They feel apart in every aspect of their school experience. They can't play together. They can't speak to other people. And they are not able to get good grades because the school doesn't give opportunities for their kids. Their language practices don't happen because they don't have opportunities to interact. And when they interact, they are not valued there. And because of that, those students, those Haitian students, are usually compared to students with learning disabilities. And they tend to get special activities. If they are 10 years old, they get activities prepared to 7-year-old students because the school in general thinks those kids have problems. They can't learn, so we'll give them easy activities so they can develop something during the year. And all of that lead to exclusion. And it is seen in the classroom. Those kids are excluded, but in a way, they only interact to other Haitian kids. And in the beginning of the year, this was seen as something useful because they come during the whole year. Haitian kids are coming. So when a new student comes, they usually put him or her in a group with other Haitian children so they can share information how school works. And this creates this gap, and this creates this exclusion in the classroom. Brazilian kids on the right, Haitian kids on the left. And some people believe this is helpful, but we know this is just a way to say the kids are not welcome in the place. And I highlight these aspects here because they are connected to racial linguistic ideologies, but there are other aspects from their experience at school that I'm going to highlight in my work. But thinking about teachers and families and social characteristics, family characteristics that I'm going to highlight as well. I can't reduce the Haitian kids to these aspects here. There are other things involved, but silence, violence, low academic achievement, comparison with learning disability students, and exclusion are concepts that are tied to racial linguistic ideologies. But my work is not only to highlight some bad aspects of our Brazilian way to see Haitian children. After discussing that with the teachers and the school community, we thought, okay, and now what? What can we do to change things in our context, to change the way we see those kids, to change how we receive them? And after discussing a lot with them, we got to a conclusion that racialized people won't get to an accepted level of language because their bodies come first in a racialized society. And in Brazil, the racial issues are really, they matter. And we see that a lot every day in social media, and people discuss that, how being a Black person in this country is tough. And those kids who are Black and from another country, it's tougher for them. So we can't expect them to get to a level of language to be accepted in this context, in this school context. We have to do the opposite. We have to accept who they are, their cultural aspects, their language aspects, and then they will be accepted, they will be valued here, they will feel part of the group. So instead of teaching what the white listening subject consider good Portuguese to those kids, we need to value their cultures, language practices, and identities in order to change our perception of their school experience. And that creates good opportunities for language learning in an intercultural environment. And this is what we have started doing. Teachers started bringing cultural aspects of the children's country. The Independence Day here, the Independence Day in the children's country, language characteristics here and language characteristics in Creole, and their identities, their festivals, their food. Those information now are being discussed at school. And Brazilian students are seeing Haitian students as their friends, as people who they can learn from. And to bring their language, we discussed a lot with the teachers that those kids are not Portuguese native speakers. So what to teach and how to evaluate must be different, because they don't learn Portuguese language for 5, 6, 7 years before coming to school. They come to school to learn Portuguese. So we have to introduce different topics, work with readings and oral abilities. They have other goals when they learn Portuguese. So this has to be part of our curriculum. What are the goals of these Haitian kids in a Brazilian society? What language practices should we develop? What should they learn? And one thing that teachers decided is that they learn Portuguese and we learn Creole. They learn Portuguese from us and we learn Creole from them. And in this way, we can create a multilingual school, an intercultural environment, and those kids can feel part of the context. And these pictures here are part of this reflection. These are some information in Creole about hygiene and protection during the pandemics. Teacher asked me to prepare that because now kids are returning to school and they want Haitian kids to feel comfortable there and to get the information. All the students get in Portuguese. They want Haitian kids to get in Creole language, because what is important here is to create a safe environment. So if the information gets, if they get information easier in their language, we are going to provide that. And also some vocabulary that now kids don't take words in Portuguese. They don't take books home to learn Portuguese at home. No, their languages are part of the school, and they can learn Portuguese at the same time they teach Portuguese. They teach Creole language to their friends. That's why all the words are here in the same size and in the same color, because there are no hierarchies. The words are there, so everybody can learn, and we create a multicultural and multilingual environment. This is something we were building throughout the year, talking to teachers, talking to coordinators, reading, discussing, talking to families. This was not one idea that I had and brought to school and shared with them. We were discussing how Haitian people are seen in our community. What can we do to make this environment more welcoming? What can we do to help those kids, to help them learn, to help them interact? And the results in the end of the year were really nice. And we had some extra material in Creole language. And now from next year on, we are going to share with other schools which receive Haitian kids. And this is the end of my presentation, and I want to highlight here that discussions on racial linguistic ideologies help us rethink spaces for languages, cultures, and subject ideologies at school. And instead of proposing a change in the racialized people behavior, we change our conceptions. We change our conceptions of what is to learn a language, what is to interact, how we in the beginning of the year, we had this idea that Haitian kids had to adapt themselves to be part of our school. And now in the end of the year, we can say that our school started proposing new things to adapt itself to receive not only Haitian kids, but other students from other countries. And that's all. Merci un peu tout le monde. Thank you very much. And that's all from the presentation. And
thank you very much.